Dunchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and it is time for the 29th edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, the series where I talk about albums, EPs, and other kinds of projects that I didn't get a chance to talk about throughout the last month or so. Today I'm going to be talking mostly about albums and EPs that released in the month of October of this year, of course, in addition to a few other goodies that released earlier this year that I just happened to miss. As usual, I'm going to be doing short, mini reviews and going to be talking about everything by order of release from earliest to latest. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about here, so let's just get right into it. I really would have liked to do a full review of this one if it hadn't slipped by my radar for like 4 months. I had no idea it existed, and there's so much in this album to talk about that I really can't properly sum it up in a rapid fire review. But overall, I guess I'd just say that this album is really cool in a lot of different ways. It's got a lot of really unique aspects to it, and I definitely suggest giving it a spin, although I wouldn't say I love it as much as Underscore's solo stuff. It's a little all over the place, and at times definitely feels like it's lacking a specific sense of direction, but I could definitely see Six Impala becoming something very special. Here's another one that completely slipped under my radar, and I really wish it didn't because it's honestly one of my favorite drum and bass albums of 2019. Lots of intricate, richly textured, atmospheric, dreamy drum and bass bangers that are often super long but don't really feel like it because they use their space up really well. Especially love the first leg of this album. The Vorso collab is insane. The latter half of this project is a bit tiring for me, so that's probably going to keep it out of my top 10 this year, but nonetheless I think it's a project worth checking out. I feel that this album may have been a bit overhyped and, dare I say, overrated as well, as to me this project is one of the most lacking bass music albums I've heard in a little while, especially when you compare it to some of Skrux's previous work. I suppose the overall track list has a decent amount of variation, and in theory that should be able to keep my interest, but the songs individually don't feel like they have a great sense of progression, and most of the songs just fall, I guess, very flat for me. I checked out this EP on recommendation from Naughty Step's Extra Naughty's video last month, and yeah, I've got to say this is a really solid EP. It's super unique, it's deep, it's dark, it's mysterious, like the EP's name implies. If you like weird, off-kilter bass music, I would definitely suggest checking it out. This EP didn't really feel like it had a lot to offer for me. I guess it's somewhat of a return to form after Dillon Francis deviating on his latest LP, and at that, it's not the greatest return to form. This EP contains far from Francis's most unique or fun material. Somewhat enjoy the tune with TV noise, and it's definitely cool to see a track from my favorite Dillon Francis project referenced on this EP, but beyond that, there's not a lot I can say about it. Pretty fresh two-sided single here from Frequent. Definitely not my favorite work by him, but it's cool to see him kind of go down a darker, slimier, I guess, direction on this project. I did not care at all for Infekt prior to the release of this EP, and though I still wouldn't say he's one of my favorites necessarily, I gotta give him props for upping his game so much on this project. I can see a ton of uniqueness developing in his sound, can possibly see him becoming a favorite, at least in his respective scene, if he continues down this path, keeps experimenting, keeps pushing. And yeah, this EP has definitely marked him as someone to watch for me. I definitely did not anticipate to enjoy this EP as much as I did. Subtronics has been proving himself again and again since the release of Tronics. I think he's got a ton of potential, and this EP shows off really well what he could possibly develop into. As you guys might already know, I don't enjoy rhythm too much as a genre, but I would definitely suggest checking out this project. I did not find this to be a very great remix album, honestly. Gotta give props to the producers involved because I don't think remixing Crywolf is the easiest task. More often than not, it seems that these remixes either play it way too safe or go so far out of the ballpark that it doesn't feel like a meaningful reimagination of the original. The remixes that do manage to find some healthy middle ground are very few and far between, and I definitely won't be coming back to this project as a whole anytime soon. I found this EP to be a decent collection of 3 tracks. It's short but sweet. Holy Schmo was probably the most memorable of the 3 tracks just because of the ridiculous little vocal bits, but I also really enjoyed Dungeon Crawler. Some dark, chiptune infused bass house. Sign me up for more. You know, on paper, this album sounds like the type of thing I would normally love, with rock meeting headfirst with electro and big room, and I can see how a lot of people who listen to mostly Spinnin' and Revealed and those types of labels would really enjoy a project like this, but for me, the execution fell very flat. For me, this album gets very tiring very quickly, both because of its sonic direction and Nino Lucarelli just appearing on literally half the tracks on this album. Did not at all enjoy the lyrical content, which for me is a huge make or break deal when it comes to rock infused stuff. Some of the lyrics are just downright cringeworthy. A couple catchy riffs and melodies across this project, but for me that doesn't warrant recommending it to anyone else. Sonically, lyrically, and production-wise, I don't really feel that this EP holds its own next to When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? While there are certainly some standout moments from this EP, for the most part I felt like I was listening to like an Ed Sheeran project with slightly better production. While this EP definitely serves as a nice return to form for Gesaffelstein after the disappointing Hyperion, I don't think this project really comes close to the glory of his early stuff. This EP is pretty much what you'd come to expect from Lil Texas. It's nothing too out of the ordinary, but I did feel that the songs on this project hit a little harder for me than Texcore Volume 1, so, you know, I guess it's worth checking out. I honestly kind of regret not checking out this album sooner than I did. It's a really pleasant listen, reminding me a lot in certain places of some of my favorite qualities of artists that I've enjoyed a lot in the past, like Avicii and Robin Schulz. Even a little bit of gospel influence in there, which I definitely welcome. Overall, not anything really mind-blowing, and I don't personally care for the kind of bonus disc second half that this album has, but the first disc is definitely worth a spin. I've had a hard time getting into a lot of MYRNE's music in the past for matter of him not really having his own distinct sound, I suppose, and that issue kind of crops up on this album just a little bit, but this project for me does serve as a really smooth and pleasant listen, a highly varied melodic bass music album that does take a lot of chances in different spots. Definitely not my favorite, but worth a listen. Not my favorite EP from Pegboard Nerds, in fact it might even be my least favorite, but that doesn't even mean I dislike it necessarily. In its favor though, the EP does do a pretty good job showcasing the Pegboard Nerds' ability to retain a common footprint throughout doing a bunch of different styles on a project. Personal favorites here are HAHAHA with Raga Twins and Crying Shame with Novo. I had really hoped to get more out of this project than I did. Like a lot of Eric Prydz stuff as of late, I feel like the great tracks are pretty few and far between on this album, drowned out by a lot of repetitive, one-dimensional progressive house. I've enjoyed a lot of Mike Posner's recent work for being very introspective and self-reflective, but I feel like this mixtape might be a little bit over the top, like him trying a bit too hard to be like woke, to the point that to me it almost feels like he's lost some of his realness. However, the Dwilly production came as a really pleasant surprise on this mixtape, almost made the entire project for me. His instrumentals are just so good on this project. Yeah, this EP is nowhere near as fun or bombastic as Bellorum's My World EP, and can someone explain to me why the title track on this project is literally The Drop by Gammer? I'm honestly getting more and more underwhelmed with Draper's pop stuff with every passing iteration, and this EP for me was no exception. Not a lot to take away from this one. Oh hey look, I opened for this guy. I do honestly think that this EP is a good listen. I feel like Dusty Cloud has been working hard to develop his own kind of style and sound, and it is showed off really well on this project. I could tell pretty much right away that this compilation wasn't going to be for me, especially not in terms of casual listening. The music on this compilation is definitely something I could appreciate more in a live context, but more than anything, I guess I'm just glad that Kaskade has found this niche, this area of dance music where he can be himself and expose, up-and-coming artists that fit that sound. For me, one of the more enjoyable bass house albums I've gotten to listen to. Chris Lorenzo has a certain groove to his music that I can really appreciate and knows how to provide some variation in order to not make the content sound too stale. This EP was honestly kind of forgettable to me. It sounded like pretty much any melodic dubstep producer could have put it out, with exception to maybe the first track on the EP, which was definitely a disappointment to me considering Midas has been one of those, standout, recognizable voices in melodic dubstep for a while. Unlike Till the End, it's not something that I really plan on returning to. This may very well be the worst EDM album of 2019. I kind of see this album as the foil to Perspective by Blasterjaxx, because while that album reminded me of all the great things about Big Room, this album reminded me of all the terrible things about it. Coming from one of the guys who co-produced Epic, I honestly expected more. Maybe I shouldn't have, but yeah, this album is just painful to listen to. Yeah, I didn't necessarily enjoy any of the songs on this EP nearly as much as Cyan's Monophobia remix, but nonetheless, I think it did a good job opening me up more into his signature sound, and I'm definitely going to be following him more closely in the future. This EP is definitely an interesting change in direction for Throttle, especially for his debut EP, but I'm not totally opposed to it either. Really, really like Japan, and I think For Me and Dreamer are decent cuts as well, though I don't love them nearly as much. It's a pleasant listen overall, but there's really not much else on this EP for me otherwise. I mean, I didn't care all that much for the original EP that this remix project is based around, but even so, a lot of really promising producers ended up on this package, and a lot of my favorites like Odd Profit and Oliver's. However, I feel like a lot of these remixes just either weren't fitting or just feel phoned in. The only two that I even remotely care about are More Kismet's remix of Born to Survive and Tynan's remix of Endgame. I felt like a slushy bass music EP was long overdue, but this EP is making me have second thoughts about that. Run Up and I'd Do Anything are really the only two on this EP that I think are worth paying attention to. I didn't even like the Dion Timmer collaboration all that much, which is crazy for me to say that. Oh look, it's another ambient album from BT, and if I'm gonna be honest, I don't care for this one nearly as much as the Untitled album. This isn't the type of drum and bass that I normally get into, but I will admit it's a pretty good listen. Uplifting at some points, experimental at others, it's got a nice balance and variation that really keeps my interest. I didn't find this album to be quite as disappointing as Armin van Buuren's latest, but it came close. It's that same line of just commercial garbage. I guess it's not 90 minutes long, so I didn't have to suffer through it for quite as much time, but still, it wasn't a fun listen. Woo! This is honestly my favorite work from Julian Kaller in quite some time, maybe even my favorite EP of his to date. Galactic Trumpet is super cool, original, and refreshing. Time with Iobon was a huge surprise to me as a callback to Julian Kaller's Revealed days, and the title track is just a freaking journey. Definitely check out this project. I'll admit I didn't necessarily love this EP, but I will praise its variation. It does a really good job of, I guess, representing direct sound on kind of all sides. Also, holy frick, I love Give and Take so much. It's like one of my favorite garage tunes that I've heard in a long time. And then the tune with Park Avenue, I'll Go, I think is really great as well. I've kind of come to the conclusion that this style of dubstep just isn't really for me. I like fresh, forward-thinking, cutting edge, and honestly, the one sounds like it's just stuck in 2011. Not to say there aren't things that I do like about this album, it's just not something I can really enjoy as a whole. Even though I'd say I like this EP more than I thought I would, and probably even more than Life Overseas, I still feel like Puppet has somewhat hit a brick wall where I don't see how he's going to artistically progress at this point. And if that's what he wants to do, if that's what's going to make him happy, then honestly, good for him. I'm hoping he continues to do it, but I don't ever see myself being in love with his music as much as I was a few years ago. This album is a big heck yeah in my book. If it doesn't end up in my top 10 this year, it'll for sure be in my honorable mentions. Just a really well put together blend of rock, chiptune, pop, and EDM. The Porter Robinson influence on this album is very clear, and I'm not complaining about it at all. USA is honestly what I expected Porter's next album to sound something like. It's really amazing. Definitely worth a spin. Trust me. This EP makes me wish that more heavy bass music producers would try out house, because the sounds are just so cool in this music and the execution is just almost flawless. Just a really cool EP through and through. Not much else to say about it. I can't really say I see this album as an improvement to Ology. Like, maybe Gallant's vocal licks are a little bit smoother, but that's really as far as improvement goes. This album doesn't seem nearly as varied or nearly as unique. I almost feel like any R&B singer could have put this album together. I would probably say this is my favorite multi-track project from Grammatic thus far. Almost every song on this EP just hits in exactly the way that it needs to. Some fantastic collaborations here as well. The tune with Kotek is just but yeah, definitely suggest checking it out. And lastly, I don't usually do this in rapid fire reviews, but I wanted to give a shout out to this new compilation from KAAZE's label, Welcome Records, called Little Comp of Horrors Volume 1. Honest to God, it's just a great collection of hard dance, dubstep, drum and bass. With the exception of We Made This for Mosh Pits, I genuinely like all of the songs on this compilation. Rounds out as maybe even a better listen than KAAZE's latest album, but I think more than anything it just proves that KAAZE has a really great taste in music. It's just that he might not always execute it the best way he can himself. And yeah, that just about wraps up this edition of Rapid Fire Reviews. As always, if you want to listen to any of the albums or EPs that I talked about in this video, I have the Spotify links for all of them down in the description below. Before I wrap this video up, I would like to take a quick moment to plug my sponsor, Audionamics. They make great audio source separation software for DJs, producers, and other types of audio engineers. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please click the sponsor link down in the description below. I get a nice 10% kickback whenever you buy any of the products using that link, so it's really the best way to support me right now. And speaking of support, we recently hit 5,000 subscribers, which is just insane to me. I've been working at this since 2010, so it's just crazy to see my channel finally finding that right audience. As promised, I'm going to be doing a Minecraft live stream to celebrate, featuring some friends. I'll probably announce on Twitter and Instagram exactly when that's going to be happening, so make sure to follow. Right now my PC is being worked on, so that live stream may end up happening later than I want it to, but I am going to be doing it nonetheless, and soon. If you're new to the channel and you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, leave me a like. Anyway, I'm Landon Remixes, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.